Welcome, everyone. I'm Sean Schroeder with CoVA Kempo here in Virginia Beach. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join me. Tonight, I want to talk about movement. Not just exercise, not choreography, but real movement, like that found in martial arts. Movement that feels natural, functional, and sustainable. But before we get into the ideas, I want to start with a story. Because for me, this journey didn't begin with flow, it began with rigidity. When I first started martial arts as a kid, it was all about order. We lined up, we bowed, we count. Every punch, every block, every kick, it had a number, had a hup. We'd freeze after every move. There was no connection, no rhythm, just hard stops and sharper corrections. And for a long time, I believed that was what discipline looked like. Structure meant control. Control meant mastery, but something never felt right. I could perform the moves, but I couldn't feel them. Everything was external, nothing internal. As I grew older, I started noticing the same rigidity showing up in daily life, in how people sit, stand, walk, and even how they breathe. Most adults today are locked up physically, mentally, and emotionally. They spend hours in chairs, hunched over screens. Over time, that stiffness becomes their normal. The same rigidity I saw in martial arts training, now I see everywhere in everyday movement. People weren't moving like humans anymore. They were bracing, protecting, and surviving. And that's when something clicked for me. Or the problem wasn't that we lacked strength or willpower. The problem was that we'd forgotten how to move. That realization sent me searching. I started studying the origins of the style I practice, Okinawan Shorin-ryu, and I found something fascinating. Shorin-ryu literally means Shaolin in Japanese. It came from the Chinese Shaolin temple. The original art probably wasn't stiff or mechanical like we see today in karate. It was probably fluid, adaptive, and circular, flowing like water. But over time, when it was translated through Japanese systems and then Western teaching, it became rigid. The flow was replaced by form, the rhythm replaced by routine. And that loss of flow was the missing link. I realized movement wasn't meant to be a series of poses. It's a conversation, in a sense, between balance, your breathing, and the intention. Each technique, each stance, strike, or block was designed to flow into the next, not stop and start, not freeze and fire. You're not striking a pose. When you reconnect that flow, everything changes. The body relaxes, the breathing deepens. Stop fighting yourself. That became the foundation of what we call CoVA Kempo, a return to the art of continuous movement. Today, most adults come to me and they say something like, I feel stiff. My balance is off. It's not what it used to be. I just don't move like I did as a kid. And the truth is, they're not wrong. Our environment has changed faster than our biology. We've designed our lives around stillness. We sit to work. We sit to drive. We even sit to relax. The body forgot how to transfer weight, how to shift, and even how to react. So when life suddenly demands movement, like when you stumble, twist, fall, or heaven forbid, someone attacks you, the body simply isn't ready. This is where martial arts should come in. not as a fighting system off the bat, but as a movement recovery system initially. Now that we've identified what we lost, let's talk about how we can get it back. Most people think movement begins with muscle, but real movement begins with awareness of where your weight is, where your spine sits, how your breath controls every shift. When awareness returns, mobility flows. And when mobility returns, strength has a place to live. Movement isn't just physical, it has three layers: structure, breath, and intention. Structure, this is your frame, the bones and joints. Breath, it's your rhythm, the fuel that powers the motion. And intention is direction, where the movement wants to go. When these three things align, the body starts to flow. Every stance, strike, or block becomes a single living idea. It's not form or function, it's both moving together. Shorin-ryu's genius was simplicity. The Okinawans stripped away excess and kept what worked. But the Chinese influence, the softness, the continuity was still there underneath. They understood that power comes from relaxation, not tension. We reconnect that lineage. The art becomes complete again. It stops being a choreography and returns to being a conversation. Think of each technique like a sentence. We can break it apart like this. This stance is the grammar. A strike is a verb. Block, that's a punctuation. If you pause after each word, the meaning disappears. But when you link them together, the story flows. That's what we mean when we say Koba Kempo brings flow back to form. So, how do we retrain that? First, we stop chasing perfection. Perfection freezes progress. So many schools focus on perfection. The block must be here, the block must be here, the punch must be there. Focusing on perfection is a hindrance. Instead, we focus on rhythm, on breathing through each movement, on letting the body adjust instead of resist. That shift alone changes everything. You start to notice tension before it builds. You learn to release instead of push. For adults, especially those who are over 40 years old, this is huge. We've built years of stress into our posture. Our shoulders rise when we breathe, hips are locked. Tempo practice reverses that pattern. Each kata becomes a moving meditation. Each repetition teaches the nervous system to trust motion again. And because we move deliberately, not explosively, you can practice for decades. When people say, I'm too old to start, I simply smile. Because the truth is, this is when you should start. At 40, 50, or even 60 years old, your body isn't asking for punishment. It's asking for clarity, asking for movement that feels sustainable. That's what recovering movement is all about. It's not about learning to fight initially, it's about reclaiming the way you were meant to move. Every martial art has a story, and Shorin-ryu's story begins before Okinawa. It starts in the mountains of China in the temple called Shaolin. The monks there didn't train to fight wars, they trained to maintain the connection between body, breath, and spirit. They observed nature, the way animals moved, how the wind flowed through the trees, and all that kind of cool stuff. They learned that strength comes from adaptability, that stiff things break, flexible things, they survive. Centuries later, that philosophy traveled to Okinawa. Okinawa was a bridge between cultures, China, Japan, and the South Pacific. It absorbed ideas from everywhere. Okinawans took the Shaolin concepts of continuous motion and blended it with their own practical needs. They refined it, made it shorter, tighter and more direct, but they never lost the principle of flow. That was the birth of what became Shorin-ryu. In Shaolin training, flow wasn't just about grace. It was a form of problem solving. When pressure came, they didn't resist it, they redirected it. That same concept appears in Okinawan kata. Circular blocks, rotational power, transitions that never really end. Every movement has a return path. Every technique has recovery. It's a constant exchange of energy. Where rigidity crept in, then something changed. As martial arts spread to Japan in the 1900s, training became systematic. Schools needed structure for large groups of students. Line drills, rank, and uniformity were introduced. They worked for discipline, but they also removed the personal expression, the essence of each karateka. Movements became poses, flow turned into form. By the time karate reached America, it was even more rigid, thanks to the American GIs. Power replaced timing, speed replaced sensitivity. Something vital was lost. The idea of martial arts were about how you move, not just what you do. At CoVA Kempo, we study those roots and restore the missing link. We keep the precision of Okinawa, but reintroduce the continuity of China. That means teaching students how to move through a technique instead of to it. A block transitions to a counter, a stance becomes a strike. Everything flows as one conversation. Think of it like music. Notes on a page don't make sense until you connect them with rhythm. That's what we do with movement. For adults, this connection is more than philosophy. It's a re-education of the body. After decades of stillness, you need a system that teaches you how to move naturally. By returning to flow, you retrain your balance, you restore your reflexes, you get your timing back. And in that process, you also reclaim confidence, the kind that comes from control, not force. One of the most important shifts we make in CoVA Kempo is learning to prioritize function over form. Now, that might sound simple, but it changes everything because for most people, especially those coming from traditional backgrounds, form is everything. We're taught to chase the perfect stance, the perfect punch, the perfect kata. But here's the truth, there is no perfect form, there's only functional movement. If it doesn't work for your body, it's not correct for you. Form exists for one reason, to teach the body principles of movement. It's a reference point, not a finish line. When we mistake form for the goal, we stop learning. We turn movement into mimicry. But when we focus on function, we start to understand why the body moves the way it does. We begin to see that a block isn't really a block. It can be a redirection or a strike. A strike isn't an act of force, it's a transfer of balance, or maybe it's a block. This is why kata are so valuable. They're not routines to memorize, they're laboratories for understanding function. Each movement teaches alignment, pressure, rhythm, and reaction. When done right, a kata reveals where your structure breaks down. When done fluidly, it shows you how breathing and timing replace muscle and speed. That's why I tell students the goal isn't to look good, it's to move well. Let's take a practical example. If you ever stumbled while walking down the road, That's your body losing functional control. When your hips, knees, and spine are no longer communicating properly, your reaction time doubles. But when you retrain your movement through kata, balance drills, and coordinated breathing, build that communication process. You're not learning to fight, you're learning to recover, to stabilize, to adapt. That's the true self defense, the ability to maintain control under pressure. Architects use this phrase all the time. Form follows function. In Kovo Kempo, it's the same idea. Your form, the way you move, should follow your purpose. If you're defending, your form adjusts to that. If you're redirecting, your form changes accordingly. Rigid patterns don't survive dynamic situations. Adaptable ones do. That's why we emphasize movement that flows so it can adjust in time. Adults don't need more drills. They need principles that make sense for their bodies. We move differently at 45 than we did at 25. I know I do. That's not weakness, it's wisdom. The goal isn't to compete with youth, it's to train for longevity. So we focus on the spine, hips, and breath. We move slower, more deliberately. We connect each stance, each transition. The result? You build stability, coordination, and confidence that lasts a lifetime. When you strip away the idea of looking right, you unlock something deeper. You stop performing, you start listening. Function teaches feedback, form only teaches repetition. And repetition without awareness is just exercise. But repetition with awareness, that's where transformation happens. When I work with adults, one thing stands out right away. The body always tells the truth, no matter how strong you are, how strong you think you are, your posture, your breathing, your balance, they tell the story. Years of sitting and stress build patterns that lock us down. Hips get tight, shoulders round forward, the spine loses its wave, and we start to move like we're made of bricks instead of springs. Think back when we were kids. Movement was instinctive. We squatted without thinking. We rolled on the ground without fear. We breathed deep into our belly. But as adults, we train those instincts out of ourselves. We learn to sit still, to behave, to hold tension. Our nervous systems got really good at one thing, not moving. So before we relearn techniques, we have to retrain trust. Trust that our body still knows how to move if you let it. For most of our students, CoVA Kempo starts as rehab, not for an injury, but for a lifestyle. Kata becomes a reset button of sorts. Each form teaches how to load and unload the hips, how to rotate through the spine, sit against it, how to breathe from the bottom up. This isn't about sweating, it's about restoring communication between your brain and your body. Your nervous system is like software, the CPU. If you don't update it, it keeps running the same old outdated programs. Old programs say protect the back by locking the hips, protect the knees by not bending them, protect the shoulders by shrinking forward. Through slow, repetitive training, we work to rewrite the code, to replace the old programs with new programs, bit by bit, block by block. We teach your brain that movement is safe again. That's why progress isn't just muscular, it's neurological. Now, this part takes time. Adults like results, but the body likes consistency. That's why we follow the 80-20 rule. 20% of what you learn happens in the dojo. The other 80%, guess what? That's on you. That happens outside the dojo, when you're home, when you're watching TV, when you're barbecuing in the backyard, but not here in the dojo. Your dojo time is for guidance. Your home practice is where transformation happens. So between classes, we give students small movements to repeat, simple drills that restore flow without forcing it. This is how you retrain the nervous system to trust movement again. Within weeks, people start to notice changes. They stand taller, they breathe easier, they react faster to simple things like catching a falling object or catching a fly like Miyagi. That's not magic. That's biological rebooting. That's rewriting the software. When you move with intention and consistency, the body remembers its design. And that's why our students stay with us for years, not for belts, but for balance. Children learn through imitation, adults through integration. We don't need more noise, we need meaning. When you understand why movement matters, you're more likely to keep doing it. And when you feel the difference in your body, less tension, more control, you start to crave that feeling. That's the power of the 80-20 principle. The dojo teaches the principles, your life becomes the practice. The benefit of this approach is longevity. You're not relying on willpower or motivation. You're building habits. Movement becomes who you are, not what you do. And that's when results compound, balance improves, stress decreases, and coordination returns. This is how we redefine practice for adults: simple, consistent, and integrated. Everything we talked about so far, flow, function, awareness, points to one simple goal: to stay capable for as long as possible. This segment is all about longevity and persistence, the real rewards for training. Longevity isn't just living longer, it's living better inside the years you have. Persistence isn't stillness or meditation, it's the ability to feel yourself moving through space with clarity. For our students, longevity shows up in subtle ways. They bend down to tie their shoes without groaning. They walk upstairs without having to think about their knees. They notice that they don't lose balance on uneven ground anymore. It's not flashy, but it's real. These are the wins that matter as we age. When you move better, you age slower. And when you age slower, you get to keep doing the things you love longer. Here's what's fascinating: modern science is catching up to what ancient systems already knew. Flow state is biological. When you move smoothly, your nervous system shifts from fight or flight to rest and repair. Your heart rate evens out. Your breathing deepens. Stress chemicals drop. Every time you train with flow, you're literally resetting your nervous system. You walk out of class feeling calmer because your biology has returned to neutral. The old karate masters used to say, move until you can't, then move a little bit more. They understood that stillness is decay. Movement keeps the joints lubricated, the circulation strong, and the brain awake. Every time you practice kata, you're not just training muscle, you're feeding the nervous system data. You're telling your body, I'm still here, I'm still capable. And that's how we age with agency: in motion, not maintenance. Presence is the partner to longevity. It's what keeps your mind where your feet are. In the dojo, presence is the moment between breaths. It's the pause before a movement where you feel everything align. That awareness carries into the rest of life. You start catching yourself when stress rises. You notice how you're standing in a conversation. You realize that the same discipline that keeps you balanced in kata keeps you balanced at work or at home. The longer you train, the less about techniques it becomes. It becomes maintenance of the machine, your body. You sleep better. You breathe deeper. You recover faster. These are the returns you can't see in the mirror or measure on a belt, but you can feel them every day. And that's the true gift of practice. It gives you time you might have otherwise lost. When I began this talk, I told you about my early training, the rigid lines, the mechanical drills, the absence of flow. I want to close by bringing the story full circle because CoVA Kempo was built from that journey, from rigidity back to rhythm. When I left the old way of teaching, it wasn't rebellion, it was reflection. I realized I wasn't looking for a new style or a new system. I was looking for a different way to move. There was a moment, quite small, that changed everything. I was watching one of my senior teachers move through a kata. Nothing about it looked fast or powerful, but every motion connected. Every breath carried intention. It was alive. And I thought, that's what I've been missing. Not another technique, but continuity. So we built CoVA Kempo around this idea, taking the precision of Okinawa, restoring the flow of Shaolin, applying it to the realities of modern life. That means training for mobility before combat, balance before power, longevity before competition. It's not a style, it's a system of improvement, traditional roots, contemporary body, practical purpose. We don't teach fighting right away, we teach clarity. We teach how to breathe when things get chaotic. In a world full of noise, rush, the dojo becomes a quiet space to reconnect, to reset. You learn to listen to your body again, to move without forcing, to be strong without tension. That is our definition of discipline, calm control under pressure. So if any of this conversation has resonated with you, if you felt that loss of movement, that stiffness, that need to reclaim your body, I want to invite you to begin. Our orientation program is 2 classes, structured to reintroduce your body to motion. There's no sales pitch, no contracts, just movement, breathing, and clarity. You can register right now at kovakarate.com or just text FLOW flow to 757-745-9041 and I'll personally reach out and schedule a time. Your first 2 classes are free because we want you to feel the difference before you decide. When I look back at my own path, what stands out isn't the belts or the titles. It's the people who rediscover themselves through movement. That's what this dojo is really about. A community of professionals, parents, students, thinkers who train not to fight, but to function. And if you join us, you won't just learn kata or self-defense. You'll learn to move strong, to age smart, and to live with presence. Because karate isn't what you do, it's how you move through life.